What you are currently watching is a round of combat in Dungeons & Dragons, as a party of adventurers played by the 5 players around the scene fight against an assortment of monsters controlled by the Dungeon Master.
What's interesting about D&D is that in combat, each round lasts a total of 6 seconds, no more, no less. So whether you're fighting a knight in a one-on-one battle for valor or stopping a dozen goblins from raiding a city, everyone always has exactly 6 seconds to act.
By way of the game being run through the explanation and the imaginations of the Dungeon Master and the players, weeks of travel can be simulated in moments should the Dungeon Master allow it to happen. On the flip side, large-scale combat could take multiple hours to simulate in reality, although within the world of the game, the battle may not last more than a minute.
But that's not how time works in real life. The leading psychological explanation for how we perceive time is that it seems to progress faster the less we think about it. When we are bored and notable events are few and far between, say on a road trip, time seems to drag on and on, but when we are deeply focused on something or lots of things are happening, like when we are immersed in a good book or fighting a dragon, hours seem to pass in an instant.
In real life, our perception of time functions as a positive exponential variable seen here on this graph, accelerating faster and faster the more action occurs. In D&D, it's the inverse, slowing down as more actions occur.
While role-playing, players have additional time that their characters would not have to think about their responses. During periods of travel, players can skip over an uneventful week that their characters would have to slug through.
We can imagine this phenomenon of time through the experience of acceleration. Larger, massive objects create a gravitational pull that accelerates objects toward them, and through this acceleration, the objects being pulled by gravity actually experience time differently. To the object being pulled, time accelerates, while if you were to perceive that object, you would see it slowing down. The different temporal perceptions are a result of the two objects' proximities to the initial object of greater mass. So if we apply this to D&D, we find that moments with a greater density of action are experienced slower by the players living in reality, while these moments technically last a very short period of time within the order of the game. As the players are above the game board, the object of greater action, they experience time more slowly than their characters, which exist on the board closer to the action site.
A phenomenological approach to time supports this notion. Martin Heidegger, writing about Galileo's discussion of motion and acceleration, says that when we measure time, we destroy its flux. We make an incision into the time scale, so to speak, thereby destroying time proper and its flow, and we cause it to cease. The flux freezes, becomes a plane surface, and only as a plane surface is it measurable. Time becomes a homogeneous place order, a scale, a parameter. This is exactly what happens during combat in D&D. The normal flow of the game, which is immeasurable and variable, is stopped and measured in ordinal chunks. By doing this, the passage of time is a parameter that the ensuing battle uses to give itself order.
Per the player's handbook, a typical combat encounter is a clash between two sides, a flurry of weapons, swings, feints, parries, footwork, and spellcasting. The game organizes the chaos of combat into a cycle of rounds and turns. Through order, we also introduce a secondary chaos of contradictions and paradoxes, which derive themselves through the incision of time. This comes from Edmund Husserl, Heidegger's mentor, who also asserts that enforcing an ordinance upon time destroys its flow.
Michael R. Kelly, professor at Boston College, wrote about Husserl's beliefs, saying, "Time can only be properly synthesized by preserving the position of each temporal event without eliminating the unity of the event chain and without relating each event so that the original ordinance dissolves."
The idea of imposing an ordinance is why we find weird time rules in D&D. Movement, actions, bonus actions, reactions, free actions, and even legendary actions all happen at once in 6 seconds. This dragon is simultaneously evading a fireball while fighting off a barrage of arrows, breathing fire on the city guards, and also biting and clawing at anyone in his range. The wizard casts 2 spells, moves behind cover, dives out of the way of the dragon's fire breath, and also talks to his allies. The ranger shoots 4 arrows while standing still, runs 40 feet, ducks behind cover, and then downs a healing potion.
If it seems like all this can't possibly be taking place in only 6 seconds, it's because it can't, and that's the cessation of time breaking down due to the incision of ordinance. By applying an ordinance with distinct rules, time seems to fracture, although with the addition of time-bending chronergy wizards and gravity-shaping graviturgy wizards, it has begun to literally fracture.
Dungeons & Dragons allows players to escape from their everyday lives. Instead of lawyers, accountants, pharmacists, and teachers, the table is full of wizards, knights, druids, and bards. D&D in its current iteration is a tabletop role-playing game, not a gritty, realistic combat simulator. That's called Pathfinder.
It allows us to experience time in exciting new ways and finally creates a sensation of agency and control that so many people yearn for in the chaotic sea of time that we live in.
And by the way, what you've just watched took place in only 6 seconds. Let me show you.